Dr. Newman, Mr. Jaitly, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Abhinav. Wonderful to be here.
Yes, it's absolutely great to be talking about humanities and so many of the other things that we just talked about. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Newman.
Sure.
Would love to understand your view on how humanities create economic value. The reason I ask that question is because as society and the economies progress, a lot of the focus due to capitalism and our predetermined notions is also on how much is a thing inherently valuable, which is where technology comes in. But I'm curious to hear how humanities play a role in that particular domain in your view.
Sure. The humanities have often been attacked for not having economic value, for having limited economic value. And nothing could be further from the truth. The skill sets that the humanities teach, the methodologies that the humanities teach, the ability to communicate effectively, the ability to write effectively, the ability to think creatively and think outside the box, the ability to bring together things that were never brought together before, connecting disparate items in new and creative ways. These are all humanities techniques and methodologies, and they contribute as a kind of multiple incubator for new ideas. And as we try to address the major problems that we're facing in our world today, the technological solutions are only partial. Without a humanities perspective, without asking the whys about implementation of technology, or the wheres, and thinking about the social and cultural histories of the places where new technologies will be implemented, we will not solve these problems. So they have a great effect. Now, if you ask me to sort of translate directly into monetary value, that's harder to do. It's more amorphous, but I do have data, and it's very accurate data, that demonstrate that those who major in the humanities as undergraduates, at the midpoint of their careers, are roughly making the same amount of money as those who major in the sciences. Often the entry level is a bit lower in the humanities, and sometimes it's harder to get to that entry level. But those skill sets are primarily adaptability skills. And unlike my grandparents who held the same job their entire lives, students today will hold multiple jobs, and the workforce will change radically. And having those adaptability skills, having those foundations, those are humanities skills.
Sure. Rishi, would love to ask you, what
Sure.
do you think about the interplay of humanities and technology? Especially because we often say that younger students or college graduates should have hard technical skills for them to be able to succeed. And especially when Dr. Newman says that, the barrier for entry for humanities is probably higher, how does that play into tech skills and so on and so forth?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I think as a starting point, humanities and technology are both truths of the human condition, right? I mean, technology itself is a from the invention of fire all the way to electricity to now generative artificial intelligence. I think we have to embrace technology positively as a truth of our human condition. The feeling you get the feeling of awe and wonder one feels when you enter an old cathedral is not dissimilar from the feeling we all felt when we received our first smartphone, per se.
Yeah.
And I think, so both come from the same place. I think it's important for the humanities and technology to not have an adversarial orientation, either or. It's both and.
Yeah.
I think our culture today, however, tends to be more technology forward. For whatever reason, we humans are always, we tend to over-rotate to the technology, and that's okay too. Part of what I've found important as someone who spent 20 years in technology, I've now resolved that I think it's important we lift up and treat the humanities co-equally. And what's been intriguing to me as someone who's been an entrepreneur and executive in global Silicon Valley, let's say for a couple of decades, is I've found that in practice, the humanities are alive and well in Silicon Valley. We know that Steve Jobs was famously not a technologist, but a humanist. We know that the founder of AOL was a politics major, the founder of Reddit was a history major, the founders of Airbnb were designers, the founder of Salesforce a history major, and on and on and on and on. So we know these things. And what we're trying to do here on this visit to India, and in a variety of initiatives I'm a part of, is give it a name. Because it's long been true that the skills of storytelling, story listening, introspection, imagination, expression, empathy, help you be a better product marketer, help you be a better salesperson, and help you be a better leader and entrepreneur. And so I hope that's a helpful starting point on this question.
That's very wholesome and holistic view of technology and the humanities and how they too have to blend together, especially as we go forward. You talked about culture, and in one of the other interviews, you've also talked about cathedral building.
That's right.
And how the people who built cathedrals did not get to see them. Curious to hear your take on how today our culture is probably headed, as you said, in an over-rotating fashion towards technology, more than building institutions, more than building culture, more than focusing on the human side of our things. Would love to understand your view, and then Dr. Newman will go to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think foundationally, I think what I love about your question is that what you've identified is that culture is how society moves. Culture is, what is culture? It's a collection of stories we tell and that we live into. And so the story we've been telling in our society, particularly in American society, but increasingly in global society, is that entrepreneurship and technology is a story worth living into. And so what does that mean? We write about it extensively, we give awards, we applaud people who live into that story. I have many cousins and nephews that call me and say, Rishi, I'm working on a startup. I said, what startup? They said, I don't know yet. I'm just working on a startup. And what that reveals is that there's a shiny narrative in the culture that they're living into. And that's okay. We're storytelling creatures. And so part of, I think, our opportunity is to tell a different story. That the story that you're calling might be distinct from the story you're hearing in your culture. And that the humanities are actually a way to cultivate an inner culture. An inner culture that takes note of your own authentic opportunity to contribute in the world and live a good life that isn't just about economic value, right? This question of living a good life, economics does not have a monopoly on that question, right? And but you're right to identify that culture is primary, and we all have a role in shaping a new kind of culture through the humanities, I think.
It's perfect.
Yes, I read recently that about 55% of young people in the United States between the ages of 18 and 25, when they're asked what they want to be when they grow up and have a job, they say, I want to be an influencer. So it's similar to, I want to create a startup. I don't know what. I don't want to know what I want to influence. And that strikes me as to some degree, really devoid of any kind of meaning and thought. It's nice that one wants to influence, but having no specificity is a problem. So I think one of the ways that humanity, I want to riff off what Rishi was just saying about storytelling and culture. I think one of the contributions of the humanities is that they all have always been the repository of all of our stories. They define our culture, they explain our culture, they also trouble the definitions of our culture in all kinds of interesting ways. And the methodologies of storytelling that the humanities present also provide us with ways to investigate and interrogate those stories. So the stories may alter, they may not be relevant any longer, they may need alteration. What is persistent, what has value in one lifetime or in one culture or in one person's state of being, and what no longer has that. So I think that kind of the importance of investigation of stories, not leaving the status quo untapped or unchallenged. The humanities are very much about that. We dwell in the realm of uncertainty. And we're very comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah. To deal with ambiguity is in itself a hard skill, which is somewhat of a rare.
Exactly.
When you talk about the influencers and younger people wanting to become that as a profession, you also mentioned how that just doing a startup for the sake of doing a startup is sort of devoid of some inherent meaning. I'm curious to hear your take on why humanities are then not being able to catch up with the technological focus and the zeitgeist that we are in today.
I'm not sure what you mean in terms of not being able to catch up. I mean, my assessment of the humanities is that they've always been ahead, that they've been at the forefront of new ways of approaching disciplines, for example, and new ways of approaching knowledge. So the humanities, we've moved very much into, in academic circles, into interdisciplinarity, into challenging the borders between disciplines and making them more permeable, to create new disciplines that emerge out of interdisciplinary perspectives. These are the ways that we attempt to challenge and combat and answer questions and solve, provide some solutions to climate change, to immigration, to racial inequality, to social inequality, et cetera. It requires a combination of things, but absent of the humanities perspective, I think those answers are quite devoid. So I really do think that there has been a kind of misperception, a misalignment, a kind of evil rhetoric about the humanities, and I think that there are nefarious reasons for that. I think the humanities are about challenging, interrogating, questioning the status quo, and that is not always a comfortable thing for those who are in powerful positions in the status quo.
I will say, just to kind of jump into your question further, that I think we in the humanities have been limiting ourselves by just anchoring conversations, at least vis-a-vis how we're doing, to who's majoring in what. Right? We all know the story of the last 20 years. When I went to college, history and English were the most popular majors. They were flooded with students, and now it's not so much the case. And I think that's one front we should dwell on. But I think of the humanities as a lifelong commitment, right? The arc of one's entire life. How might we at each stage of life insert an opportunity for the humanities and rigorous experiences in the humanities to be available to all? That's why a year ago I founded in the United States the world's first executive degree in the liberal arts and humanities as a way to show, not tell, this truth that when you're in the middle of your career and you've been in the workplace and you've been on Zooms and in your inbox and in pitch meetings and in product brainstorm sessions, you begin to realize how much power there is in these human skills and sensibilities. And so people in the middle of their careers actually get it. And so I think we just need to make the humanities far more available, not just in the academy, but in the real world as well. And I'm excited the wind is blowing in that direction.
I think what I really appreciate about this whole conversation is the fact that we're moving away from the humanities as an academic pursuit or as a means to an end or as a college major to a lifestyle and to something that has to be the overarching, overwhelming sort of canopy in which the skills such as functional skills or tech skills and so on and so forth reside. And I think that is the broader mission that you're probably going for.
That's right. I think it's both and. That's not to say that I don't believe that a rigorous experience in and around the humanities in your undergraduate, particularly in your undergraduate education, can pay dividends in big ways for decades to come. That is my view still as a history major. But I do think we need to be empathetic about a 17-year-old or 18-year-old making a decision about what course they pursue in their career, all kinds of reasons, and they may have different passions informed by the culture around them. That's okay, but I think we need to dress the humanities up a little bit differently, and I think part of what I have found in my career, because I've been in technology, sometimes the best way to do that is to show, not tell, right? And so now I can point, for instance, in my program to here's a bunch of executives in the middle of their careers paying money to do creative writing, to study history and philosophy, so that they become better storytellers and better writers, and therefore better salespeople and better leaders.
I think if we were to ask most people at whatever age, and particularly adults of any age, to focus on a moment in their lives that was transformational, that caused them to say, aha, now I see, or to take a new direction because of that experience. I think most of those experiences come from the humanities. And the humanities are all about revelation and epiphany and mystery and getting in touch with one's heart and empathy and building character and connecting and fostering the public good. And these are tremendously valuable, I think almost anyone would admit. I think it's often interesting to do a thought experiment and to say, how might we imagine the world without the humanities? What would that look like?
Right.
Without metaphor, without revelation, without epiphany.
Yeah.
And the line that comes back to me frequently when I think about that is the first line of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, where she says, imagine the world without birdsong because of DDT.
Yeah.
Well, imagine the world without metaphor. What a flat world that would be.
Right.
What a non-textured world that would be.
Yes.
So, dwelling solely in the economic realm, and the economic realm I agree is quite important, gives a definition of what is useful that is extremely narrow.
Yeah.
And I think we need to broaden our definitions of what is useful.
Got it. Could you talk a bit about the National Humanities Center and the efforts and the mission around that whole initiative?
Absolutely. I'd be honored to do so. This is my lifeblood. So I've been the president of the National Humanities Center for 9 years now. The center was founded in 1978. It's the world's only independent institute for advanced studies that is exclusively devoted to the humanities. So its parallel, for example, is the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton that was built in the 40s around Einstein, primarily to focus on the math and sciences. We have the Stanford Center for Social and Behavioral Sciences, another institute for advanced studies. We are the one for the humanities in the world. We're a nonprofit. And since 1978, our core mission has been our fellowship program. We get about 600 applications annually from scholars all over the world who want to have a fellowship at the center to focus for 9 months on a book project, typically, major book project. We select about 35 of those 600, and the books that they have written there, I think we've now have had fellows over our 45-year history published somewhere in the neighborhood of over 1,600 books. They won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award, all the major prizes in their various disciplines. So it's a kind of who's who of productivity in the humanities. Very, very prestigious fellowship. Yet, and one of the reasons that Rishi and I are here, we have never had a fellow from India.
Yeah.
We've had people who have grown up in India and have their academic homes in the UK or Germany or the United States who come to the center as fellows. We have Indianists who study India, but someone from a university in India, we've not had any applications. So we're trying to elevate the profile of the National Humanities Center here and hope that a number of universities and individuals and foundations might get interested in making sure we get a fellow from India, because it elevates the profile of India as well as the center. It's a mutual thing quite substantially. Very quickly, the other two parts of our mission, we have a very vibrant mission of scholarly. Everything's underpinned with the scholarly, but we have a very vibrant education mission that reaches out to about 3 million teachers, K through 12, community college, university teachers, used by them annually. We have curricular materials. We have a webinar series on contemporary issues that might be taught in the classroom. We do a number of teacher institutes. We do podcast institutes and train people how to do podcasts also effectively. So that is a very popular program. It has a quality, a scholarly quality, and credibility that is absent in most online education because most of the materials are vetted through or conducted by former fellows at the center. We also have a very vibrant public engagement mission. And that's a mission essentially to do what we're doing here. Attempt to explain what the humanities are and why they're important, to translate that esoteric scholarship in ways that are accessible and understandable to the general public, and to get more people in the general public to realize not just the significance in the classroom, but also how the humanities underpin their own lives and serve them in fostering a more fulfilling life, how they pull together various disparate aspects of a society to make them more harmonious, and perhaps most importantly, in today's culture and today's politics, how they are really the foundation of the principles of a vibrant democracy.
Incredible. Rishi, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I have the honor of serving as a trustee of the National Humanities Center, and I'm vice chairman of the board, so I'm very, very honored to be here in India with Dr. Newman. And a couple of other reflections, if I may. One is about India. You know, I've had the good fortune of living in India a couple of times in my career, working on India really throughout my career. And I would say that India is a magical place to unlock one's inner humanist. And what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of people ask me, what are the humanities? What are the humanities? What are the humanities? And maybe that's something we should dwell on for a second. Yeah. What are the humanities? Yeah. And about a year ago, I wrote a poem, a 6-word poem, to describe the humanities. I'm going to tell you that poem. Yeah. And the poem is Awe and Wonder in the Other. Awe and wonder in the other. And in many ways, the humanities are a set of educational experiences and experiences, all kinds of experiences, that cultivate in oneself an ability to sit with the human other. Yeah. And in our self-involved, sort of short-form world, the ability to think in long form about human others is a superpower. And what other country, you know, India in so many ways is a microcosm of the world, right? In India, I think we have an opportunity, all people have an opportunity to really train themselves to be anchored in human others. And when you do that, you become a better leader in an organization. Yeah. You become a more perceptive entrepreneur. Yeah. You become a more perceptive product executive, a much better salesperson, yeah. a much better visionary for your team. And so I think I actually credit India in many ways with unlocking my inner humanist and my inner intellectual, if you may. And so when I joined the board of the National Humanities Center and learned that we've never had in 50 years a scholar from India, immediately Robert and I began brainstorming that we got to come here, spread the word, find Indian partners so that the best of India is represented on the stage that is the National Humanities Center.
You know, I love the articulation of how India brought out the humanist in you.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I'm also a bit curious as to why, you know, if India succeeded at bringing out the humanist in you, why do we not have a single Indian applicant to the NHC? And, you know, from an educational or policy perspective, or even from a society or a personal perspective, what can we do to further the future and the mission and cause of humanities?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll kind of leave it to others to sort of reflect on why in India we haven't had an applicant yet to the National Humanities Center. But I think that, you know, around the world we've seen cultures rotate, as I was indicating earlier, towards technology. Yeah. And so I think it's on all of us to actually try to mainstream the attractiveness of being a humanist in technology and the power of the humanities and technology. And so we're trying to tell that story here in particular. You know, it's interesting, in the National Humanities Center, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and a whole range of American institutions built around the humanities were founded during the Cold War. Wow. Isn't that interesting that sort of during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, during a period where the United States was very STEMmy, it's then that the United States said, you know what, it's also important for us to not lose sight of another North Star, and the North Star of arts and culture. And so one of my hopes, or one of the things I'm tracking these days with the rise of AI, is which governments around the world will lean into what AI policy and tech policy should look like, but might also have an eye on the humanities. So it'll be interesting to track that.
What do you think, Dr. Newman?
Well, far be it from me to explain why we haven't had applicants from faculty in India. Part of our mission is to elevate the profile of the center so that people are more aware. I've done a similar thing with the support of the Luce Foundation with China and Taiwan and Singapore and Hong Kong earlier in my tenure as president. Not to have India as part of that is a sacrilege as far as I'm concerned. You're the world's largest democracy. You have the world's largest population. You're a vibrant culture. Every time I've come to India, I have a sense of the layers and layers and layers of history that are here. And I come from, of course, the United States is a relatively young country in comparison. So you have so much to teach us, and to get scholars from India around the lunch table with scholars from other places all over the world would be itself a kind of incubator for knowledge and collaboration that I think would be mutually enhancing. So not quite sure, but hopefully this is a start to open people's eyes, to get some of your top scholars to go to their administrators at universities and say, wow, I really like this opportunity, and have those administrators seek support from individuals or foundations or funders throughout the country so that this can indeed take place.
Very well, very well. You talked about what are the humanities and how we could possibly talk about that. You know, you've worked with some of the biggest tech companies and you've had a very technical experience and yet a very human experience.
Yeah.
And here we are also talking about the Institute of Leadership at Virginia Tech, which is also an interesting volunteering experience that you've picked up, and that's something that's quite innovative and unique. I'm curious to hear your take on what are the humanities, especially in all these contexts over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think as it relates to what are the humanities, I've resolved that they lie in this little poem I crafted, right? This notion of awe and wonder in the other. I think one of the things that happened to me, when I first joined tech, I was at Google almost 20 years ago in the US and then in India, and then at Twitter here in India and across Asia, and was in venture capital, of course, around US to India. Now I advise a range of technology companies, including OpenAI. I think one of the things I've taken away in broad strokes is that these companies are places with human beings. Initially when you join these tech companies, like all people, you feel insecure. Do I belong? Do I know enough? But when you realize that these companies are a collection of people who are making choices, who are fallible, who themselves live in ambiguity, you begin to see your opportunity to have agency and make a difference. And so for me, I have found that the humanities actually, as a history major, provided me perhaps an intellectual versatility that allowed me to learn very quickly the latest in product and engineering at Google, or contemplate an acquisition at Twitter, that I led, or negotiate opportunities in venture capital and think about product localization for a range of companies in India. I've actually felt that the humanities actually have made me more valuable in many ways. But again, I come back to India taught me a lot of this. To live in the density and clutter of India actually forces one to think and detect signal from noise, to develop vision that transcends all the clutter. That's what the humanities do. The humanities teach you to, and the history degree in particular, teaches you to make sense of a dense set of information. And in many ways, that's what the best entrepreneurs in India do, right? And so it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm very lucky to have had that and to have a chance to give back too now via this new school I've started at Virginia Tech. It feels like my 5th startup. and then also through my service at the National Humanities Center.
Dr. Newman, you've been a professor and you've been in academia. I'm also curious to hear how, from a non-academic perspective, you think about the whole subject of humanities. We're also talking about how humanities is, for lack of a better phrase, a way of life. And I'm curious to hear, I've got Rishi's perspective on how humanities and business and tech are very relevant. I'm curious to hear your take on how, from a non-academic and life perspective, what are they and how do they continue to matter to us?
Sure. Well, I'll pick up on what I was speaking about earlier about these moments of transformation that we all have in our lives. So if we imagine, the moments in which we fell in love, the moments in which we experienced great pain or loss, explaining those moments, coming to understanding of those moments, we do that through stories and through the humanities perspective. So I think the humanities are their explorations and investigations into all the complexities of the human condition, all the messiness of what makes us human. They probe into something to which we respond on a deep emotional level. So they knit together the heart and the head, the intellect with deep feeling. And I think that's what is so attractive about them. That's why so many students really get turned on in their humanities classrooms by what they're reading and find it really, really exciting. And what all people experience in various moments of life. And I think there's also a kind of almost mystical, mysterious quality to that and to those moments of transcension. I'm reminded, if you'll indulge me just for a minute, I'm reminded there's a poem by James Wright called A Blessing. It's a lovely poem, and it's about the poet kind of driving his pickup truck off in the countryside in Montana or Wyoming, I can't remember which. And he's in a hurry to get to where he has to go, and he sees on the roadside these two beautiful horses, a brown horse and a black horse, just kind of grazing in the field. And he just finds them so beautiful that he just sort of stops his truck on the side and decides, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to just walk over and pet these ponies. And the ponies come over to him, and he nuzzles them, they nuzzle him, and he's taken time out from the hustle and bustle of things. And I think the poem, I'm going to try to quote the end of the poem, it says something to the effect that, suddenly I realized if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom.
Wow.
Now, this is like an other body, otherworldly experience. There's something so simple. Just taking the moment. And one of the things I think, or some of the things humanities do, is they teach us to listen carefully, which is a lost art these days. They teach us to stop and reflect and make sense and make connections. So there's therefore, to my mind, no greater aspiration in the human condition than to be able to attain these things, and we attain them with such little frequency these days. So the humanities remind us of this, the importance of taking the time to do that.
You've taught English as well. I remember from my school and college experience, and over the years, some of the core things that I've learned and that I still continue to cherish have been specific lines from many poems, which have sort of defined the fork in the road moments for me. And it's in those moments that you realize how humanities plays such an important role, as you said, when you're making those important decisions.
Yeah, and I think we in India, all of us from India or of India, have an appreciation for language. The number of times I've seen, my parents or others doing dialogues or quoting lines from beautiful songs and films. Right? I think it's in us. It's in the air here, right? So I guess part of my realization these last years, Abhinav, is the humanities are flourishing underground, invisibly, and we don't give it a name. And part of what we're trying to do now is give it a name and mainstream the idea that they've always powered us and added to our heart. And one of the ways I think about this is, imagine it's the year 2050 and you're in a meeting at work, right, 26 years from now, and someone says something profoundly impactful in that conversation. Let's say it's a startup. What is it about that comment that will have moved the needle? Is it that this person will be a more effective programmer or out mathematically modeled, you know, someone else on a forecast? I doubt it.
Yeah.
I think it will be, as Robert was saying, that this person had deep feeling in what they were expressing, and it was expressed with a kind of clarity and precision and vision that is uncommon. And that's a human skill and sensibility. And so I think, as I look back, you know, we all have mentors and role models, right? And as I reflect on moments in the professional world, because I'm trying to help this make sense for young people, ultimately. As I look back on 20 years of memorable meetings, or memorable moments in the workplace, or a memorable comment someone made in a board meeting, to me, the comment and the impact came from a human superpower they had.
Right.
And I think, given the rise of AI, and looking ahead to the year 2050, I think it'll be even more so. And so for me, I work backwards from that, and I think this frame of deep feeling is an important one.
I think even the distinction, you know, from this conversation, I'm thinking as I speak, even the distinction between hard skills and soft skills is arbitrary. I think you need to have skills in general, and humanities need to be the enveloping cocoon in which everything goes.
Yeah, one frame that might be helpful, that a gentleman named Scott Hartley, who wrote the book The Fuzzy and the Techie, Stanford grad, that he and I have talked about is, you know, we have this frame called STEM, right? And many people have added an A and called it STEAM. But one frame he and I have come up with is this idea of the full stack human, right? In the technology landscape, we think in terms of the stack and which layer of the stack are you coding or programming, front end, back end, et cetera. Well, imagine the full stack human of the future, and what are the layers of that stack? And I think of the applied layer as sort of today's technology. Are you fluent in AI a couple of years ago, in Web3, a few years before that in Web2, et cetera? But what's the foundation of that full stack? And I think the foundation can be the liberal arts and the humanities, right?
Incredible.
And I think that's a more integrative way to think about the role of the humanities as not, you know, left, right brain, but part of the full stack that is going to be, you know, essential in the future.
Incredible. I have two last areas that I just want to cover. You mentioned, you know, you want to make this accessible for young people as well as part of the mission. You know, and a lot of young people are also seeking for not only practical life advice, and they want to go into the philosophy and the reasoning, but they also want some tactical, you know, ground level advice. In terms of that, you know, for somebody who is watching this, the ages of 15 to 35, like what should be the few things that they should be doing to further their humanity through the humanities?
Oh, well, I guess what I would say is read. There's no substitute for reading. I mean, what does narrative accomplish? Narrative allows us to flit across boundaries of space and time and nationality and identity. It allows us to you know, travel without getting on an airplane. It allows us to inhabit the mindset or the body of someone else who's so different from us, and experience a sense of empathy and compassion. And it also sharpens our mind to the nuances of language, and sharpens us in terms of our ability to interpret carefully. And I think there's no substitute for close reading. And reading really, really carefully, not just skimming, but reading really, really carefully and thinking about how a very talented writer makes the magic of language work for the reader. So I think reading is one essential skill set, and practicing in multiple forms, and this comes from reading, written and other communication skill sets as well. When I speak to employers who, and I ask them what the gaps are in their entry-level people, they almost to a person say written and communication skills, number one. Number two is the ability to think outside the box, to make connections that are not just transparent, to link things together that were never linked together before. These are all humanities skills.
Incredible.
Yeah, I would say three things very quickly. One is just to build on what Robert said. I think just taking enormously seriously written expression. I think, and it takes time. But I myself, I try to at least in every text I send, every email I write, every all words around me. I take each one really seriously, wow. and I think just cultivating a habit of taking seriously one's written output will, I think, pay long-term dividends. And it may take you more time, and people that have been on teams that have reported to me over the years may have made fun of me for how long my emails are and things like that. But I think taking seriously the written word. Two would be, this is coming from a little bit of my experience, but when you live as an expat somewhere, I think it cultivates a lot of these superpowers as well, right? So any opportunity one has to change one's cultural environment, I think also cultivates this, almost foreign correspondent-like superpower. And then the third thing I would say is, look, I think all of us, and this is going to sound strongly put, I think many people in the real world are already self-medicating with the humanities, the podcasts they listen to, the YouTube videos they watch, the Netflix shows they watch. Any opportunity to climb higher and have a shared rigorous experience, so you're not just sort of winging it on your own and listening to something while driving that's intriguing and about philosophy, but any
to create.
Yeah, any opportunity, that's right, with some accountability you have to, and that's why I started this program where students in my program who are in the middle of their careers have to write papers and have to attend seminars and listen to lectures and go on, visit our campus and things like that. So any opportunity you can find that can climb up the rigor, with more rigor, I think will be valuable as well.
That's incredible. And one of the conversations that we've had in the past is how, as the world becomes increasingly technical and technologically driven, you need to take the hard left turn to become more human.
That's right.
In that world. And especially, the zeitgeist of today is artificial intelligence, and I'd love to close on that note. Would love to hear your thoughts, the role of humanity in an AI world, and what can we do to further our own humanity in this era?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, I reflect on, that AI and generative AI, these are all outputs of human initiative. And there are a range of choices all these companies are making about data, about geography, about language, how to train their models, which markets to enter, what use cases matter here, right? And so underneath the headlines about generative AI are actually a set of human questions around and serious choices to make around what these models look like, where research is undertaken, what use cases to shine a light on, et cetera. So I think there are ample opportunities for people who come steeped in the human other to add a lot of value there. I think I would also say that the good news here is that these companies are already over-rotating to the humanities, right? In many ways, most of these AI companies are already spending a lot of time with civil society, with public policy makers, very early in their corporate moment. This was not the case with other technology eras that sort of stayed away from, let's call it the publics. And so I think that's a factor that flows from the wind blowing in the direction of the humanities, actually. And I think a lot of these companies are craving people that come with expertise in human communities. And I'm delighted to observe that.
Incredible. Dr. Newman.
No, I would concur with everything Rishi has just said. I think it's really interesting that a lot of humanities scholars are doing this now to explore the boundaries between the human and the non-human and the post-human and the machine and the human, and what are those boundaries and how are they shifting. So I think that's quite important. We are sponsoring at 15 universities in the United States this year the development of 15 undergraduate courses on responsible AI. So this is ethical AI. So the idea of, what are the ethical questions that one must ask before the implementation of this technology? One of the most burgeoning areas of the humanities is an interdisciplinary area called environmental humanities. And at least in my estimation, and the estimation of many, many others, more than I do, the greatest crisis facing us today is climate change.
Yeah.
It's a planetary crisis. And environmental humanities is one discipline that has emerged to try to address this, to include the science and the technology with the humanistic perspective. So in thinking about the human and the machine, I would also urge us to think about other forms of non-humans and the diminishing biodiversity that we have on this planet and the rapid extinction, cascading extinction of other species, and how that is caused by human enterprise. And that has to be stopped, or the humans will go down with everything else. And hopefully AI can play a role in helping us, in providing some tools to help us think through how we can be better stewards of our planet and shore up the public good, not just for humans, but for all species.
Incredible. Dr. Newman, Mr. Jaitly, this has been a pleasure.
Amazing. Wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah,
Abhinav.
great
Thank
questions.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's great.